Welcome to Pigskin Glory, football 50 years ago today. Tonight, we're wrapping up the month of May, a 1976 month that gave us free agent drama, coaching changes, and enough contract negotiations to make a divorce lawyer blush. Joining me first is Chris. Chris heard John Riggins was asking for $1.5 million and immediately declared himself a free agent. Unfortunately, the only offer he's received so far is from a flag football team in Wisconsin. Welcome, Chris.
I guess John McKay thought my offensive execution wasn't in his favor.
And joining us from California is Charles. Now, Charles is such a sports historian that he fact checks encyclopedias just for fun. Last week, he found 3 mistakes in the Guinness World Records and demanded they trade him to Britannica. Charles, welcome. So, what we're doing is May of 1976, a month that doesn't have any games, but it has got a lot of drama. And let's go ahead and share my screen and head over to the Facebook post. Again, if you want to see the post day to day, it is live on Facebook, facebook.com/pigskinglory, football 50 years ago today. And here's what it looks like. Also on Facebook and YouTube every afternoon or every evening around 6 p.m. It'll be a little later once the football season actually gets underway. We have we have recaps. And the reason I keep looking to my right for those watching on the podcast is the podcast is being shown live on TikTok while we're recording it. It'll be posted on Facebook and YouTube around 9 p.m. on Monday night, June 8th, 2025. I almost said 1976. That's the month we're reviewing. So we start with Saturday, May 1st, 1976, and right off the bat, you're going to see some transactions. Lydell Mitchell is being linked to a contract extension. We also have big news. It's Freedom Day, May 1st, as several free agents, we'll get to this in the recap, Riggins, Gabriel, John Gillum, Fred Dreyer, Ahmad Rashad, they are now free agents under a new system ordered by the courts. And it is time for that recap. The NFL offseason hits a turning point. Freedom Day arrives as players who've played out their option year enter free agency. It's a small class, just over 20 players, but it includes big names like John Riggins, Roman Gabriel, Ahmad Rashad. The impact of the folded World Football League and ongoing labor uncertainty keeps the pool limited, but the idea of player movement is clearly starting to evolve. Meanwhile, teams continue to focus inward, most notably the Baltimore Colts, who lock up 1,000-yard rusher Lydell Mitchell to strengthen their offense alongside Burt Jones, signaling stability over chasing the big free agent names like John Riggins. There's no Football Digest for May of 1976, only one of 2 months without an issue, making April's edition the last snapshot before a brief publishing gap. Free agency is here, but still in its infancy. Teams are cautious, players are curious, and the league is quietly stepping into a new era. Charles, baseball is also going through a tumultuous turning point in the 1970s. How does this free agency compare to what's happening in baseball at the same time?
I think baseball free agency may have a little bit more movement, but it won't be until July when Marvin Miller will propose and the owners will agree to the situation where a player who played 6 years in the major leagues will be eligible for free agency should they play out their option on the 7th year. And the reason Marvin Miller did this is that he knew that every player would be free agent every year. The supply of free agents would be so high, the cost to sign players would be low. But if you trickle down the free agents, keep the supply low and demand high, then their value will go up. John Chancellor, a Canberra of baseball, said it best: "The law of supply and demand now favors the players."
Very well said. Chris, any rebuttal to that?
Now, I will note, though, that technically the first baseball free agency shots will not be fired until after the 1976 season. So, in a way, Charles, while the players got their freedom of free agency, at least for 1976, we're not quite there because it's after 76 in which the players will officially be able to shop for the groceries to fulfill Parcells.
No team more so than the Athletics. 9 players play out their option years. They're not going to stay with the 8 out of 76 because of Charlie Finley's cheapskating ways.
One of the interesting things that we do here in Pigskin Glory is at the end of every Saturday, we get a weekly recap. You can see those on the Facebook page as well. I did start doing videos for daily recaps. I will not do videos for weekly recaps because I still believe reading is fundamental, and I want you, the reader, to check those out. Now, we move into Sunday, May 2nd, and the big news coming on early Sunday is the retirement of Len Dawson. We'll get into that in just a second. Plus, not to mention that one of the sad things about looking back in football is players pass away. Patsy Gugliano passed away in May 2nd, 1976. And let's take a look at the recap. A day that perfectly captures the NFL's connection between the past, the present, and the future. An end of an era. Len Dawson officially retires after a 19-year career with the Dallas Texans and Kansas City Chiefs. Super Bowl IV champion and the face of the Kansas City franchise. Immediately transitions to broadcasting with NBC, signaling the next phase of his football life. Remembering the early days, the football world also notes the passing of Patsy Gugliano, a player from the league's formative years with the Louisville Brecks, a reminder of how far the game has come since the 1920s. One legend steps away from the field, another from the game's earliest chapters remembered. From the formations of the 1920s to the Super Bowl era of the 1970s, the story of football keeps moving, carried by the men who built it, played it, and now tell it. Chris, looking back on Len Dawson's career, what stands out to you as probably his defining legacy?
Well, obviously, he put the Chiefs on the map. You know, for an older generation, he was a face of the AFL. He put the Chiefs on the map, won the last game pre-merger. And Vinny, of course, remembers him as the voice of one of the voices of Inside the NFL. And when the Bills were making all those Super Bowl runs, Vinny, I'm sure you heard a lot of Len Dawson's voice when he was recapping the Bills week by week in the early 90s.
Well, you have to remember, I didn't have cable, so I did not hear that. Charles, any thoughts on Len Dawson from your standpoint?
I think of Len Dawson. I think of him obviously as a broadcast because that's what I best know him for.
Moving on to Monday, May 3rd, we've got more sports transactions. I just did that's going to reset us, aren't we? Okay. Sports transactions, Winnipeg Blue Bombers, Dallas Cowboys, both in the
Winnipeg Blue Bombers.
Okay, we're gonna pause the recording as I've got an issue with my computer right now. We're still live on TikTok, but yeah, nothing. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Nothing is working on my computer on my screen right now. Everything is frozen. So hopefully it's still recording, but when it comes back,
not only can I see it, I can see you moving your mouse, so it isn't frozen.
No, it's just nothing's responding.
Oh.
I can't click on anything else. And I made the mistake every month when I do this, I click on one of those and I can't even. Wow, this is weird. Oh well. Well. Oh, okay. Oh, something happened. Something moved. And all right. So we got that. At least now I can go back. We were on May 3rd, so we'll zoom and then and for those on who are seeing this on TikTok, these are technical difficulties. It'll all be cut out from the official post on YouTube and Facebook and Patreon for that. Actually, no, this won't be cut out of Patreon. This part will stay because that's why you get to pay the subscription fees to see the behind the scenes screw ups, right? The bloopers, if you will.
Oh, buddy's nerfect.
Yeah, yeah. I wonder if they're clogging Ed McNair when we see these bloopers at some point.
Hi-oh.
Okay, so we're back to where we left off, and So May 3rd brought more sports transactions for a Monday. Winnipeg and Dallas are in the picture. We'll take a look at the recap, see if any other teams made any movements. Also, looks like another passing. Ernie Nevers. So this one's a huge one. Ernie Nevers was a legendary player in the NFL, but let's take a look at the daily recap. A monumental loss. The football world loses Ernie Nevers, one of the true giants of the early game, a Pro Football Hall of Famer, Stanford legend, Chicago Cardinal great, and owner of the historic 40-point game. Nevers represents the rugged foundation of pro football. Roster moves. The Dallas Cowboys sign running back Dwayne Thomas, bringing back one of the most intriguing names in recent history. In the CFL, the Winnipeg Blue Bombers sign rookie wide receiver Terry Grammer and lineman Jim Boyle, formerly of the Cowboys. May 3rd brings both football business and football memory. Modern rosters keep shifting, while the game pauses to remember one of its earliest legends. Now, we're going to talk about Ernie Nevers in just a second, but first, Chris, I want to get to the signing of Dwayne Thomas going back to Dallas. In 1976, is he going to have any impact?
Evidently, no.
He is past his prime, and this is one of those stories of a player that probably hung on far longer than he needed to, but teams kept bringing him in, so you can't blame the player. Back in the 1920s, that happened with Jim Thorpe. And Charles, whenever the football world or baseball world loses a legend, we must pause to reflect. Now, Ernie Nevers might not be a name that people in 2026 know.
I did not know that until now. And turns out the 40 points, also 6 touchdowns, and he kicked 4 extra points to account for all his team's 40 points.
A record that still stands today in 2026. No NFL player has scored more than 40 points in a game.
Yes, because while there have been now Alvin Kamara once scored 6 touchdowns in a game, but that was only 36 points. He still fell a few short of Ernie because Nevers also kicked the extra points.
I don't know why Alvin Kamara couldn't be bothered to go out and kick extra points too. I mean, but no, seriously, guys, they did that in 1976. Sports Illustrated also came out on Mondays, and in May 3rd, Charles, hey, look, on the cover, Mike Schmidt.
4 home runs in a game will do that to you.
Moving on to Tuesday, May 4th, we get some transactions as both the Bengals and Colts are making moves. Archie Griffith watch, there's big news on him, and in May, he's going to be a huge part. The NFL going global as the Chargers and Cardinals will play a preseason game in Tokyo. The Chicago Bears are signing Jerry Tagge. It was a day of rookie signings, big name decisions, and historical global announcements across the football world. Cincinnati signs linebacker Reggie Williams, while Baltimore locks in number 1 draft pick defensive tackle Ken Novak. Archie Griffin headlines the day, leaning toward the Bengals despite strong interest in money from the CFL. The NFL takes a global step as the Chargers and Cardinals game in Tokyo is announced, the first ever in Japan. The Chicago Bears add quarterback Jerry Tagge, bringing experience and championship pedigree to the roster. From roster building to international expansion, May 4th shows the NFL continuing to grow, both in talent and reach. Chris, the Tokyo game in 1976 was a big deal. Nowadays, we play so many games overseas and out of the country, it's not even worth mentioning half the time when they announce these games. But in 1976, this was a huge deal, even for a preseason game.
Yes. Now, I will say sending the Cardinals over was a good choice, but with all the AFC teams available, San Diego, one of the worst teams in 1975. Are you surprised they didn't send a little better team like a Denver, maybe a Baltimore, a Houston? I can see the Cardinals. You kind of surprised they sent the this is before this is pre-Coryell. This is before they were good.
It really is weird how they pick the teams. I mean, you mentioned San Diego not being that good, and St. Louis is a 2-time defending NFC East champion, so it does make you wonder as to why San Diego was chosen, and if, for that matter, if it was just a random. Preseason schedules are pretty random to begin with. We move on to Wednesday, May 5th, and we got more roster transactions going on in both the NFL and the CFL. Archie Griffin era begins in Cincinnati. So after using the CFL as leverage, he officially signs his contract in Cincinnati. The story of the day is simple and massive. Archie Griffin officially signs with the Cincinnati Bengals. The two-time Heisman Trophy winner chooses the NFL, ending the CFL speculation. A hometown fit becomes reality as one of college football's greatest begins his pro journey. Dallas Cowboys add running back John Smith and cornerback Henry Laws. The Calgary Stampeders bring in defensive end Gary McClung and offensive lineman Larry Titley. This was the day the biggest name in football finally put pen to paper, marking the true beginning of a new era in Cincinnati. Charles, do you think Archie Griffin was ever really serious about Canada?
No, I don't think so. When you play, a lot of people, when you play football, your main goal, you want to play for the National Football League. And some feel the Canadian Football League is a downgrade, as it were.
Well, I want to mention that, ironically, Vinny, a very notable football player in the early 90s actually did choose the CFL over the pro football. So, Charles, contrary, we believe once upon a time, a prominent college football star actually did choose the CFL over the NFL.
Yes,
Well,
Desmond Howard.
Wanted to of more pay in the Canadian Football League?
So Desmond Howard, no, not
Rocket Ismail.
Rocket Ismail. Sorry, Rocket Ismail was a Heisman Trophy finalist, I believe. And who drafted him? Or did he sign before the draft? He went to Toronto to play for the Argonauts in 1991 and helped lead Toronto to the Grey Cup and would, in turn, end up with a bigger contract in the NFL after the fact.
Oh! If a player chose to go to Canadian Football League because of more money, it wouldn't be unprecedented because Tony Kubek revealed a story in 1985 ALCS regarding then Blue Jays pitching coach Al Wedmore. He was playing in the minor leagues. He was playing in a minor league ball club that was paying more money than what the St. Louis Browns were willing to offer him when he was called up from the major leagues, and Al Wedmore refused to go at first.
Moving on to Thursday, May 6th, NFL free agency news. One of the first big-name free agents signs as wide receiver John Gilliam has signed with the Atlanta Falcons. Draft choices are still deciding. Again, the CFL is coming into play with some of these guys being able to use leverage. Free agency and league competition continue to shape football world today. The Atlanta Falcons make the biggest move of the day, signing star receiver John Gilliam away from Minnesota. Gilliam joins a growing Falcons offense led by young quarterback Steve Bartkowski. The NFL-CFL battle also remained a major storyline as Michigan State quarterback Charlie Baggett appears headed for the CFL instead of Green Bay. The Washington Redskins may lose the rights to 2 Canadian college draft picks who still have eligibility remaining. And the modern player movement era is beginning to take shape in 1976, with free agency competing leagues and player leverage becoming bigger stories of the day. And Chris, what is your take on the first of the big name of the class of 20 signing with John Gilliam going to Atlanta?
Well, considering Atlanta has never made the playoffs before and Bartkowski needs some help, what better way to help a young rookie than a guy who's actually been to a Super Bowl, played in some big games for Minnesota? You always need that veteran receiver, kind of like think Lance Allworth on the Cowboys in 1971. You need that guy who's been in the wars.
Yep. All right, moving on. It's Friday, May 7th. The Bengals are at it again, signing more of their draft class. A lot of NFL and CFL transactions going on. And here's interesting is our athletes overpaid is a story in the Tampa Tribune. We'll get to that in the recap. Speaking of the recap, another active offseason day brought more rookie signings, CFL movement, and discussions about the growing business of sports. The Cincinnati Bengals continue building around their rookie class, signing Ohio State linebacker Ken Kuhn. And he joins Archie Griffin and Reggie Williams. Around the NFL, the Rams add running back Mac Heron. The Chiefs sign 3 players, including defensive tackle Willie Lee. The Colts, Bears, and others continue adding depth. In the CFL, the Hamilton Tiger Cats signed Michigan quarterback Charlie Baggett, continuing the tug-of-war between the NFL and the CFL for talent. Off the field, one of the day's biggest discussions centered around whether pro athletes were becoming overpaid as football business side continued expanding in the mid-1970s. The 1976 offseason keeps showing a changing football world. More player movement, more money, and growing competition between the leagues. Charles, looking back 50 years later, do you think that the talk of the player salaries being extraordinary in 1976 is just a precursor of things to come? Or do you think that maybe this writer was onto something and perhaps was looking to curb it?
Well, maybe could be onto something here. And they're going back to the Canadian then sal because Canadian pay CFL and the NFL minimum salaries. This as of right now, NFL rookies get almost $900,000 a year on salary. In Canada, the league's minimum player salary is 70,000 Canadian dollars, and that's Canadian dollars. Convert that to U.S. dollars, it's more than $50,000. So maybe that's why I said because that players going to Canadian Football League would be a downgrade because the pay is way less. And then in 2026, why don't you? If the Canadian salary is $70,000 now, minimum salary. I hate to think what the salary was 50 years ago north of the border.
Yep, no doubt. All right, moving on. It's Saturday, May 8th, and we have, again, more transactions. We're going to be doing this throughout the offseason as players continue, or teams continue to move their rosters around, getting ready for training camp. The Jets are involved in some signings as well. We have a loss as the football world mourns the recent passing of Anton J. Butch Stolfa, former Chicago Bears quarterback from 1939.
But by the way, the minimum salary for rookies in 1976, $12,500 for rookies and $13,000 for veterans.
Pigskin Glory recap for May 8th was another busy offseason day across pro football as NFL and CFL teams continued shaping their rosters for the future. The Buffalo Bills signed versatile lineman Ken Jones from Arkansas State, while the New York Jets officially brought in Penn State linebacker Greg Buttle. Cincinnati added quarterback Bob Bateman before later finalizing the signing of Ohio State legend Archie Griffin from earlier in the week. Expansion franchise Tampa Bay kept stocking its inaugural roster with several new additions. Washington also strengthened its offense by signing veteran tight end Gene Fugate, while CFL teams remained active with Calgary adding multiple players north of the border. The day also carried a somber note as football remembered Anton Butch Stolfa, former Chicago Bear quarterback and defensive back from the 1939 season, whose passing saddened the Illinois football community, where he later became a respected coach and athletic director. Another spring day in 1976 showed the NFL steadily evolving, young draft picks entering the league, veterans changing teams, and the game continuing to honor the men who helped build its earliest generations. Chris, of the signings, there's not a lot of big names other than Archie Griffin's deal being officially finalized. Does anything stand out to you from these signings?
The Greg Buttle thing, because Lord knows the Jets need defense, and with the Namath era just about to hit its twilight, they kind of need some guys on defense because Lord knows the Jets haven't had defense in a while, and you got to start somewhere on defense, especially because this is a time when defenses dictate the game in 1976 big time. Because in an era of the Steelers and the no-name Dolphins and the Raiders and all these tough teams, the Jets have to get some defense.
Good point. Again, on Facebook, you can look at an entire weekly recap, May 2nd to the 8th. And
by the way, before we go on, I found out the Canadian football salary for veterans, the minimum salary in 1976 was 11,000 Canadian dollars. That's converted to $10,836. So it was all the exchange rate between the U.S. and Canada was almost equal 50 years ago. So, and I thought it was going to be way more than $11,000. But I think it was probably because of a Canadian football player strike that happened some point in 76, and you'll probably go more in detail on that later on in this series.
On May 9th, we introduced our new profile picture for both Facebook and YouTube. Silver and black seems to be the theme of our profile picture this year. Moving on Sunday, May 9th, we have David James signing. He's a quarterback from Kansas. He is signing with the New York Giants. Also, the NCAA starts reclassifying their Division One. Here comes the split between 1A and 1AA, or as it's now known as FCS and FBS. John Hadel is adapting to life as a football nomad as he moves again to another team. And on May 9th, we lost Dan Reeves. No, obviously, he did not go on to coach Denver as a zombie. This was a different Dan Reeves. Oh no, this is okay. I'm going to go cut that out. We'll go back. On May 9th, Dan Reeves, the former quarterback of South Carolina and running back for Dallas, is inducted in the South Carolina Athletic Hall of Fame on May 9th. We have more pro transactions as Tampa Bay, the Giants, making moves. And take a look at the day overall. Another fascinating mix of NFL roster movement. College football change and veteran player stories from across the world. The New York Giants signed former Kansas quarterback David James as a free agent. Offseason roster building continued around the league. College football also took a major step toward its modern future as the NCAA began discussions about reorganizing schools into new divisions, including the future Division I and Division 1A structure that would reshape the sport for decades to come. Veteran quarterback John Hadel was featured adjusting to life as an NFL journeyman, while Green Bay continued transitioning toward younger talent during the rebuilding years following the Bart Starr era. Dallas Cowboys running back Dan Reeves prepared for induction in the South Carolina Athletic Hall of Fame, honoring both his college and professional football success. Around the NFL, the Buccaneers, Jets, Giants, and Cardinals all remain active, signing players as teams continue preparing for the 1976 season. Another day in football history showed both the past and future of the game colliding. Legendary veterans nearing the end, rookies entering the league, and college football beginning changes that still impact the sport today. Chris, take us for a minute. Your thoughts on Division I college football being split into two separate divisions, 1A and 1 at the time, which we would know growing up as 1A and 1AA, and now FCS and FBS.
Yeah, it's kind of wild because I guess apparently there's too many teams and they figure you don't want to have too many teams in 1A and you got to put another. This is kind of a weird thing. So in other words, like the Youngstown states of the world and the North Dakota states of the world, they can't play a Big Ten or a Big East team or like, I don't get it.
This is another move toward the eventual, the haves get richer while the have-nots don't. And you'll have schools that will struggle in recruiting in the same state as major powers just because of their classification. If you're and I said this for years, if you're a blue chip athlete growing up in Boise, Idaho, and you love the Boise State Broncos, but USC comes calling, are you going to sign with Boise or are you going to go to USC where you might get a chance at a Heisman, chance at a national championship, and a better draft pick in the NFL? Sure, you can still get that at Boise, but it's more likely at USC. And this is one of the starts to that, where college really starts to push down its inferior schools and say, you're not one of us. And it will continue throughout the 80s and 90s and eventually create the Power 5 conference and the mid-majors, who, your best champion can come in our playoffs. Maybe. You might be a 12 seed. Moving on to Monday, May 10th, more NFL transactions. One name that I see right here, Sam Weish, being signed with the St. Louis Cardinals.
Sam Weish, future coach.
You don't live in Cleveland. You live in Cincinnati.
Well, now he lives in St. Louis. More rookies being signed with the Bears. Sports Illustrated. Normally, here's one of the issues on May 10th that I had. Normally, on Monday, I try, or it'll be Sunday in 2026, but when it coincides with Monday in the calendar in 76, I try to do the Sports Illustrated, but sometimes the mail is slow and I didn't have it that day. May 10th was another active offseason day around the NFL as teams continued shaping their rosters through rookie signings and free agency. The New York Jets stayed busy by signing multiple players, including James Anderson, Clark Gaines, Ray King, and Greg Harris. The New York Giants officially brought in quarterback David James as a free agent. We had seen that story from the day before on Sunday. On Monday, it's official. His winding professional football journey after his standout college days in Kansas. The St. Louis Cardinals added quarterback Sam Weish and linebacker Bill Ferguson while continuing to evaluate roster depth heading toward training camp. The Chicago Bears also officially signed third-round draft pick Jerry Myers from Northern Illinois, adding another young piece to their defensive line. Meanwhile, Pigskin Glory's weekly Sports Illustrated feature hit a snag as a rare delay of the modern mail kept us from being able to post on that day. Charles, there's not a lot of big names on Monday. Obviously, Sam Weish is the biggest, and he becomes a bigger name later with his coaching days. But St. Louis adding him as a depth position quarterback behind Jim Hart, is that a good move at the end of his career?
In a comparative NFC East, yes. And look at the Giants and Jets, whom they brought in. There is still some other free agents out there, and ironically, two of the players that are free agents will later be known for something else in the '80s. Ed Marinero, formerly of Cornell University, he'll go on to be on Hill Street Blues, and Fred Breyer will later join San Diego before becoming a Hunter.
Yep. Moving on to Tuesday, May 11th. Not as much in the NFL transactions that day. But one of the big things here is how the Buccaneers beat the Seahawks in the expansion draft. That's the Murray Olderman's editorial. The NFL offseason continued rolling along on May 11th with more rookie signings and discussions surrounding the league's newest expansion franchises. The Chicago Bears added linebacker Jerry Muckensturm from Arkansas State and tight end Ron Parker from TCU, as teams across the league kept filling out their training camp rosters. Meanwhile, football columnist Murray Olderman gave an early vote of confidence to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers over the Seattle Seahawks in the battle of the NFL's expansion teams. Olderman believed Tampa Bay's focus on youth and organizational structure helped the Buccaneers develop faster than Seattle as both franchises prepare for their first season. It's fascinating looking back knowing both teams would eventually carve out long NFL histories despite difficult beginnings. Another quiet but important offseason day in 1976 football history, where roster building and expansion optimism continued shaping the future of the league. Chris, your thoughts on Murray Olderman's thoughts?
October 17th, Seahawks at Buccaneers. Circle your calendars.
The game of all time.
Now we move on to, I believe we're on Wednesday, NFL transactions. Both in the NFL and CFL were heating up. Fran Tarkenton named quarterback of the year for 1975, according to the AP, according to the AP.
United Press International. That's incredible.
The NFL offseason remained active on May 12th with expansion teams, veteran movement, and one legendary quarterback still standing near the top of the football world. Tampa Bay continued aggressively assembling its inaugural roster, signing several free agents, including Michael Kelson, Larry Martinez, Pete Rajecki, Ted Jornov, and I apologize if I'm butchering those names, and Brad Watson, as the Buccaneers kept building from the ground up. Denver added veteran defensive back Rick Volk on waivers from Baltimore, while Cincinnati traded defensive end Royce Berry to the Chicago Bears for an undisclosed draft pick. Houston also stayed active by bringing in another wave of free agents as teams across the NFL continued adapting to the changing offseason landscape. North of the border, Les Alouettes de Montreal signed veteran defensive tackle Glenn Weir to a 3-year deal in the CFL. Meanwhile, Minnesota Vikings quarterback Fran Tarkenton added another honor to his legendary football career after being named Pro Quarterback of the Year. At 36 years old, Tarkenton remained one of football's premier quarterbacks while also weighing in on the league's developing free agency system, believing teams with strong organizations would continue to keep their stars. Another fascinating day of signings in the spring of 1976, where expansion football, free agency, and Hall of Fame greatness all crossed paths. Chris, Fran Tarkenton, did he deserve to be the 1975 quarterback of the year?
I think he did, because while statistically Joe Ferguson was close to him, but Minnesota won 12 games while Buffalo was barely above 500, and Jim Hart's stats were not quite as prolific. But don't forget, Tarkenton also set all those records. He had the numbers, he had the winning, and he broke Unitas's records.
It's also interesting to note his comments on free agency, where he thinks that the teams with the best organizational skills will be able to keep their stars. It's a unique thought on that. May 13th, May 13th, by the way, is an interesting date, something I want to bring up. My new book, Will You Always Show Up, features the character of Avery Edwards and her birthday, May 13th. You can get this on Amazon. More football transactions between the Bengals and Falcons occur. NFL labor talks shift the tone as the owners negotiating with the NFL Players Association and the players now have more backing behind them. The NFL offseason continued evolving on May 13th with rookie signings and more discussion surrounding the league's changing labor landscape. Cincinnati signed Nebraska running back Tony Davis as the Bengals continued strengthening their young offense. Atlanta officially added Texas A&M running back Bubba Bean, one of the Falcons' top draft picks, and a player expected to bring explosiveness to their backfield. Off the field, one of the bigger stories centered around NFL labor negotiations. NFLPA President Dick Anderson was credited with helping create a more cooperative tone between players and owners following the years of tension surrounding the Rozelle Rule and player movement. The article made it clear that players were not pushing for unrestricted modern-style free agency, but instead searched for a balanced system that worked for owners and fans alike, and players as well. And another reminder that during the spring of 1976, the NFL was quietly laying the groundwork for major labor and free agency changes and would reshape football in the decades ahead. Now, Charles, we spoke earlier about the free agency. This here also changes something else with the players' union and negotiations with their labor deal and free agency being involved in that.
Now, while the NFL Player Association might not be as more powerful as the Baseball Player Association with more than Noah, the NFL players might be beginning to gain some ground. I mean, in 75, the minimum player salary was $15,000 to $20,000, depending on the season. And the league average was $56,000 a year in 75. Joe Namath, whom you think is overrated, was the highest paid NFL athlete in 75 with $450,000 a year, and that was on a 2-year deal with $900,000. To put it in perspective, in 1975, the Major League Baseball top paid player besides Catfish Hunter was Hank Aaron with $240,000, and he was in the twilight of his Major League career.
Are you telling me that? Are you telling me, Charles, that Hank Aaron and Catfish Hunter made more money than anyone on the Reds, the Pirates, the Red Sox?
Yeah, at least what was reported.
That's crazy to think.
Chris, when did you think that Dick Anderson had better blocking? His pick six in the 1971 AFC Championship, or having the courts help him with free agency as the president of the NFLPA?
I'm going to have to say the pick six in 71. Now, by the way, funny story about that. Nick Buonicotti once said, you were so slow on that run. I went to the stands, got a hot dog, came back, and you were still running. His response, you're the only guy that didn't throw a block.
Yeah. Friday, May 14th, we have NFL transactions, of course. Every day we're going to have that. Tampa Bay and San Diego are in the news. We have the WFL's impact on the NFL is still being felt, as this article describes how NFL owners originally laughed off the WFL, believing the league would quickly fail. It wasn't as quick as they thought, but it was called a Mickey Mouse outfit. Milton Richmond talks about how Frank Gatzke is still center of attention, Frank Gatzke being a former Cleveland Brown. Sports Illustrated came in late this week, and on the cover, the Kentucky Derby's Cordero's bold triumph. The NFL offseason continued evolving as teams searched for depth, free agents looked for opportunity, and the league kept adjusting to a changing football world. Tampa Bay stayed aggressive, building in its inaugural roster, acquiring tackle Tim Guy from Buffalo on waivers while adding linebacker Bertram Cooper and defensive back Mike Shaw. The expansion Buccaneers was still throwing bodies at the wall, trying to find anything that could stick. San Diego added more offensive and defensive help by signing running back Arnold Morgado and defensive back Pat Richardson as free agents. Meanwhile, discussion around player movement and salaries continued heating up across the football media. One article reflected on how the World Football League had forced NFL owners to spend more aggressively just a couple years earlier. At first, the NFL laughed off the WFL until salaries started exploding. Former Browns center Frank Gatzke also made headlines in a feature reflecting on life after football. One of the great linemen of the 1940s and 50s, Gatzke discussed the transition from NFL star to ordinary life away from the spotlight. And after delayed arrival, this week's Sports Illustrated issue finally showed up. Alongside Kentucky Derby coverage and discussions about free agency, was one of the best sections was the fans letter page. Readers passionately defended Colorado football after Sports Illustrated highlighted Nebraska and Ohio State draft success, reminding everyone that sports fans in 1976 argued just as fiercely as they do today. The offseason may not have had games, but May of 1976 was packed with football expansion talk, building from scratch, labor tensions, and cooling slightly football slowly stepping into a new era. Charles, the NFL, they should have learned their lesson from the AFL. Now, they did end up defeating the WFL much quicker, but I think that had more to do with the WFL being ineffectual getting TV contracts and such more than the NFL just laughing them off.
Yeah, I think the WFL was on shaky financial ground to begin with. And then you said that the lack of a major TV contract led to the downfall of the World Football League.
Now, on the flip side, you talk about that, but let me remind you guys that some of the other upstart leagues, the World Hockey Association and the ABA, were able to last pretty long. How come the WFL couldn't even make it to 2 seasons? The ABA lasted almost a decade, and the WHA and hockey lasted 7 seasons.
Again, I want to say it's the lack of the TV contract. I mean, just the simple fact that if you couldn't get physically to the games, how are you going to follow a team? Like, I mean, what if I wanted to be a fan of the Hawaiians because I think Hawaii is one of the greatest states in the country? How am I going to ever see their games?
Especially with most TV markets, you still had only maybe 6 or 7 channels on average. You ABC, CBS, and NBC affiliate, and 3 a PBS station and 2 independent stations.
Moving on to Saturday, May 15th, the Bengals have opened spring camp. That's big news around the NFL as not only the Bengals, but other teams start coming to camp. More NFL transactions are occurring. Let's take a look as football season still sat months away, but across the NFL, the groundwork for the 1976 season was starting to take shape as spring camps opened and transactions continued rolling in. In Cincinnati, the Bengals officially opened spring camp at Wilmington College under head coach Bill Johnson. Veterans, rookies, and unsigned hopefuls all reported as the club began preparing for a season filled with growing expectations. The Bengals were trying to build on recent progress while integrating new talent like Archie Griffin into the roster mix. Quarterback Ken Anderson remained the unquestioned starter, though the Bengals noted John Reeves would rotate through some practice reps as camp competition began. Around the league, teams continued signing rookies and free agents. Green Bay had one of the busiest days, adding several young players, including running back Andre Thompson and wide receiver Jesse Green, as the Packers looked to build depth. San Diego officially signed 4th overall draft pick Ron Singleton from Grambling, as the Chargers hoped the athletic tight end could become a major offensive weapon in the years to come. Baltimore strengthened its defense by signing linebacker Jim Chayansky and defensive tackle Larry O'Rourke. Atlanta also continued adding pieces, signing free agent linebacker Jim Sandusky. Meanwhile, the delayed Sports Illustrated issue finally became part of the week's conversation. The magazine captured a fascinating snapshot of spring 1976 sports culture, from NFL free agency discussion, labor negotiations, to fan letters passionately defending Colorado's football decision NFL draft. The deeper May 1976 move into spring camp season, the more NFL starts shifting from newspaper speculations to real football preparations. And Chris, the Bengals have a new coach, a top rookie running back. They have a lot of expectations after 1975. What do you think the hype in Cincinnati and on the airwaves of WKRP would be saying in 75?
As God is my witness, I thought Steelers could fly.
Again, it's the Saturday, so we got a weekly
The
recap.
question is, will the Oakland Raiders finally fly after nearly a decade of dominance? But after being bridesmaid in the NFL for the last 10 years, will they finally cast the bouquet?
Funny you mentioned that, Charles, because it was Oakland that knocked out Cincinnati in the playoffs.
But lost the Steelers in the championship game again.
Saturday night had the football recap. We move on to Sunday, May 16th, and free agency is still moving slowly as there were more players available still. We've only really heard of John Gilliam's name so far. We have a passing to report. Rollin Roach. John W. Rollin Roach passed away at 73. He was part of Newt Rockney's legendary Notre Dame program. He passed away on May 16th. Another one is Red Maloney, who played with the Providence Steamroller, New York Yankees, and Boston Bulldogs. And unless you know nothing about 1920s football, yes, those were NFL teams. As the NFL continued stumbling its way through the earliest days of modern free agency, May 16th offered another reminder that the football world of 1976 was caught somewhere between the old system and whatever the future would become. Free agency still moved at a crawl. 2 weeks after players officially became free agents, only John Gilliam's move to Atlanta had truly made major headlines. Owners remained cautious, uncertain whether compensation rules tied to the weakened Rozelle rule might still come back into play. Green Bay openly admitted interest in several major names, including Fred Dreyer, Ahmad Rashad, and John Riggins. But unlike the rapid-fire free agency modern fans know, negotiations in 1976 were slow, uncertain, and filled with hesitation. Meanwhile, football also paused to remember some of the men who helped build the game decades earlier. John W. Rollin Roach passed away at the age of 73. A member of Knute Rockne's Notre Dame program of the 1925 Rose Bowl team, Roach later played for the Chicago Cardinals during the NFL's rugged early years before serving in the military and government roles. Gerald Red Maloney also passed away this week. The former Dartmouth star played professionally with the Providence Steamroller, the New York Yankees, and the Boston Bulldogs during the 1920s, sharing the same field at one point with legendary Red Grange, as well as the same nickname, Red. These notices are small reminders that by 1976, many of football's pioneers were fading into history, just as the sport they helped build was exploding into a national powerhouse. And in many ways, that contrast defined May of 1976. The old generation quietly passed on, while a new era of contracts, free agents, television money, and player movement slowly began reshaping the league. Chris, your thoughts on Green Bay going after all these guys? Years later, 16 years later, when free agency becomes a thing, Green Bay makes the biggest splash of all when many experts thought they would never have a chance to land anybody. But here, even in 76, they were trying.
Now, in regards to some of the guys, now obviously they do have John Brockington. They're trying to replace MacArthur Lane, but Rashad just played for the Vikings. I don't know why he wanted to go there. And in the case of Riggins, they lost MacArthur Lane and Brockington's looked a little shaky. But Fred Dreyer going from the Rams to the Packers. I mean, that's a weird one.
Not a lot of quarterback hunting went on in Green Bay in 1975, so maybe that would be an interesting move for them. Moving on to Monday, May 17th, Sports Illustrated came early, and Dr. J was on the cover of that Sports Illustrated. Well, and that takes us right into the recap. Today we took a deep dive into this week's Sports Illustrated and discovered just how much a single magazine could reveal about the sports world in 1976. Dr. J dominated the cover. Jay Berwanger reminded us how uncertain pro football once looked. He was the game's first Heisman Trophy winner and then first number one overall draft pick in NFL history, and he did not play a single down in the NFL. The NFL's toughest schedules were debated months before kickoff. The jockey underwear ad may have stolen the entire issue, as NFL players were pictured in their underwear. And fans weren't shy about speaking out on football, religion, and commercialization. Sometimes one magazine tells the story of an entire era. Moving on to May 18th, we have more sports transactions. This time, it's dominated up north as Toronto and Winnipeg make moves, but so do the Washington Redskins. And Fred Dreyer signs with the Los Angeles Rams. This isn't something that many saw coming, as he was with the Rams before.
That's not Fred Dreyer. That's Jerry Dyer signing with the Rams.
No doubt, Jerry Dyer. Well, I need to put my glasses on because apparently I can't read. So here I thought I was breaking major
news,
but it's Jerry Dyer. Good catch, Charles. Jerry Dyer signs with the Los Angeles Rams. So apparently they wanted to replace Fred Dreyer with Jerry Dyer, and Dyer's a quarterback. So instead of being hunted by Fred Dreyer, he's the quarterback, adding depth to the Rams.
No, true. But the question is, will Stephen B. Kramer be the spy on the quarterback?
Milton Richmond had a feature on college superstar Tony Dorsett. Another passing is Leo Lyons, NFL pioneer on the Rochester Jefferson Leader, passed away. Bob Waterfield's son was arrested and released on bail. The son of Jane Russell and Bob Waterfield had some problems with the legal system. Today's journey through May 18th, 1976 gave us a fascinating mix of football transactions, rising stars, forgotten pioneers, and even a glimpse of how football culture had expanded beyond the sports pages. The day began with the CFL and NFL transactions news as teams continued preparing for the upcoming season. The Jets, Redskins, Argonauts, and Blue Bombers were all active, adding depth and competition ahead of summer camps. In the mid 70s, this was the time of year where franchises searched for hidden talent that could surprise people by September. We also looked at the Los Angeles Rams signing small college quarterback Jerry Dyer. The Southern Utah State standout had shattered passing records at the NAIA level and represented the growing trend of NFL teams scouting beyond major powerhouse programs. One of the biggest features of the day centered on superstar Tony Dorsett. Even before entering the NFL, Dorsett was already being discussed as a franchise-changing player and symbolized the changing economics of football as contracts and expectations around elite players continued growing. We then remembered Leo Lyons, one of the true forgotten founders of professional football. The former Rochester Jeffersons leader helped build and preserve the NFL while its fragile early years and devoted much of his life to protecting the history of the game. Finally, football specifically appeared in the entertainment pages as a story involving Hall of Fame quarterback Bob Waterfield's family surfaced alongside Hollywood coverage. The article served as another reminder that by 1976, football stars and their families had become deeply tied into celebrity culture and mainstream American life. From the birth of the NFL to celebrity era of pro football, May 18th, 1976 touched nearly every corner of the game involving history. Charles, in 2026, it's not a surprise to open up your sports webpage and find news of an NFL player being arrested or NFL player family member being arrested. However, it was not the case in 1976. And one of the only reasons it's not the player itself, but who his parents are, one of them being an NFL player, another a Hollywood star, that made him news
Jane
spot.
Russell. I have heard of her. I have heard of her, but I didn't know she had a son who was a football player.
Well, the son wasn't a football player. The husband was, Bob Waterfield. But the son he made the news because of who his parents were. Kind of like, we'll say Hunter Biden. The only reason that the news cycles talked about his problems are because of who his parents were. It's the same thing when you're a child of a celebrity. You make the news even when you probably shouldn't.
And that's unfortunate. The pressure of a kid whose parents are celebrities, it can really get to you.
Moving on to Wednesday, May 19th, we have several teams in both the CFL and NFL making transactions, as we have throughout much of the month. Steve Spurrier makes an appearance in Lakeland, Florida. The new Tampa Bay Buccaneer quarterback will be making a personal appearance on Saturday at the J.C. Penney store. Dick Butkus is finally settling down, moving into retirement. As we learned in April, he's still not ready to be retired, but he is finally starting to settle down in May, as another article looks in there. The NFL is officially changing the punting statistics on May 19th. And let's take a look at the daily recap. May 19th was another busy transaction day across both the NFL and CFL as teams continued shaping their rosters ahead of summer camps and preseason preparations. The New York Jets remained one of the league's most active teams, signing a large wave of free agents, including defensive back Willie Thompson, linebacker Frank Jones, defensive end Steve Brown, running backs Irvin Stevenson and Sandus Turner, along with several receivers and defensive players. The Steelers also added depth with a collection of free agent signings of their own. Out west, the Los Angeles Rams continued building roster competition by signing quarterback Jerry Dyer, along with several other free agents. Dyer's story itself became one of the more interesting note of the day. The Southern Utah State quarterback signed a 2-year contract with the Rams and spoke confidently about finally getting an opportunity in the NFL after a standout small college career where he broke numerous passing records. Meanwhile, Steve Spurrier continued preparing for the inaugural Tampa Bay Buccaneers season. A newspaper feature highlighted the former Heisman Trophy winner making a public appearance and autograph signing in Lakeland, Florida. The article reflected on Spurrier's college greatness at Florida, his years backing up John Brody in San Francisco, and the anticipation surrounding Tampa Bay's first home game later that summer against Miami. One of the more thought-provoking football discussions of the day centered on changes to the NFL punting statistics. A columnist praised the league's decision to finally deduct touchback yardage from the punter's net average, arguing it better reflected actual field position value instead of rewarding booming kicks that simply rolled into the end zone. The same article questioned how passing yardage should be recorded, debating whether quarterbacks deserve full statistical credit for short throws that turn into long runs after the catch. The day also included another reflective feature on Dick Butkus as the legendary Bills linebacker adjusted to retirement. The column focused on the contrast between the terrifying image Butkus carried on the field and the quieter, more grounded man away from football. It painted a picture of a player whose intensity defined the era of NFL defense. By the end of the day, the football world of 1976 continued showing signs of transition. Roster building was becoming more aggressive and statistical evaluation evolving, and legends of the previous decade were beginning to settle into life after the game. Now, none of us were alive in 1976, Chris, so what is your first recollection of Dick Butkus?
Well, let's see. I believe the NFL films highlights of him. They talk about the fact that he and Gale Sayers were both picked in the same draft by the Bears with consecutive picks. In other words, the opposite of the 92 Colts.
I first was introduced to Dick Butkus as a cast member on the TV show My Two Dads, starring Paul Reiser and Stacy Keenan.
Wait, that's Stacy Keenan? Dana
Yes.
Foster?
That's why before she was Dan Foster on Step by Step.
Now, would you trust this man to tell you about football in 1976?
If that don't scream 1970s, I don't know what does.
That man looks like he's about to watch the Tampa Bay Buccaneers pretend to play football.
On Thursday, May 20th, we had some more roster moves, including my Buffalo Bills finally making some news. But one of the big pieces is the Denver Broncos signing former Miami Dolphin and Memphis, it says Grizzlies. I thought they were the Southmen. Jim Kick signing with Denver. Alex Karras is being sued for divorce by his wife, former Detroit Lion. And we got here one of the biggest debates is the NFL blackout rule. That's up for debate again, whether the NFL will make the new rule permanent. Plus, NFL rounded out another busy day, legal battles of the era as former Kansas City defensive end John Lohmeyer's lawsuit was dismissed in court in Topeka, Kansas. And we have a picture from the Los Angeles Rams training camp, mini camp. Thursday, May 20th, 1976 became another fascinating offseason day across the NFL. Roster movement, television politics, legal battles, and even training camp imagery helped paint a picture of professional football in transition. The Buffalo Bills continue adding young depth pieces by signing ninth-round draft pick Bob Couture, along with linebacker Curl Krull and defensive back David Walker. Around the league, teams kept searching for affordable talent as camps approached. One of the day's biggest veteran stories centered around Jim Kick. The former Miami Dolphins running back officially signed with the Denver Broncos after spending time with the Memphis Grizzlies of the defunct World Football League. Once part of Miami's legendary backfield, I'm pretty sure it was Memphis Southmen. That might be a newspaper glitch, which is weird considering that the basketball team is Grizzlies. Miami's legendary backfield during the Dolphins' dynasty years, Kick now attempted to extend his career in Denver as many former World Football League players worked their way back in the NFL. The Chicago Bears strengthened their backfield by acquiring veteran running back Eddie Moss from St. Louis for an undisclosed draft choice. Meanwhile, the New York Giants suffered a setback when offensive guard Tom Mullen underwent surgery after rupturing a bicep muscle in his left arm. Off the field, former Detroit Lions star Alex Karras made headlines as news broke that his wife had filed for divorce after 13 years of marriage. By 1976, Karras had become far more than just a former football player, successfully transitioning into television and acting during an era where NFL personalities were beginning to cross into mainstream entertainment. One of the most historically important stories of the day involved Congress debating whether anti-blackout television laws should become permanent. The discussion centered around allowing local broadcasts of home games if stadiums sold out 72 hours in advance. The debate highlights growing tensions between protecting ticket sales and expanding television access as the NFL rapidly evolved into a TV-driven league. Meanwhile, in California, the Los Angeles Rams held spring drills at Blair Field in Long Beach, a baseball stadium complete with scoreboards still designed for balls and strikes and outs. The image perfectly captured the contrast between the NFL's growing popularity and the still modest realities of team operations during the 1970s. By the end of May 20th, football in 1976 felt like a sport balancing two eras, one still grounded in old school simplicity, while steadily marching toward the massive media driven business the NFL would eventually become. Charles, we look back at this picture of the Rams training camp and you see the balls, strikes, and outs. It's
Yeah.
just a good capture of what football was like when you're sharing facilities in 1976. And that would continue on into the 2000s.
Yep, that's right. And Three River Stadium is a prime case of it with the Pirates and the Steelers playing at Three Rivers. And by the way, those who saw Steelers in '75, tickets for those games went from $8 to $10. And if you were fortunate to go to the Super Bowl, all you had to pay to see them play the Vikings was $20. Try paying $20 for a football game today.
I'm going to 3 games this year, and I'm not going to tell you what I paid. It's a lot more
I
than
don't
20.
blame you.
By the way, Vinny, got a quick shout out to Vinny. You went to the last Bills game at the old stadium, and you're going to the first game at the new stadium.
Both the first preseason and first regular season game. I'll be making announcements of that on the History of Buffalo Bills channel in the weeks to come. May 21st to Friday, a lot of action going on. We actually even included the baseball roundups, Charles, as even during the season moves happen, as you well know.
Oh yeah, the great Moon Man in the Giants organization, and John Walton, a player will remember, called up from AAA.
Way back Wasden.
Another thing that's going on is the Miami Dolphins tight end Marv Fleming openly discussing trying to get unemployment after his time in the league ended. And Tank McNamara, a cartoon strip by Jeff Miller and Bill Hines, mentioned football and Rosie Greer and Ray Nitschke advertising light beer commercials, and Tank McNamara thinks he should be getting some of the same stuff. Friday's football headlines show just how wide-ranging the sports world had become in the spring. From roster moves and labor questions to television rules and even comic strips, football was becoming more connected to everyday American culture than ever before. The Buffalo Bills continue adding depth to their roster, signing defensive tackle Bob Kotzer, along with several free agents as teams around the league kept rebuilding after the draft and the WFL fallout. The Denver Broncos officially adding former Dolphin running back Jim Kick, while the Chicago Bears acquired running back Eddie Moss from the Cardinals. This seems like a lot of it from the day before. Here we go. Meanwhile, sports comics and entertainment pages showed football's growing place in pop culture. Tank McNamara referenced football personalities and celebrity athletes, highlighting how endorsements and media appearances were becoming increasingly tied to the sport. And in one of the more visible, that's again from the day before. So I didn't pay attention to the. It looks like I copied and pasted the wrong stuff. But Chris, looking back on the day, there wasn't a whole lot to talk about. But Marv Fleming trying to collect unemployment. What do you think the percentage for an NFL player would be for unemployment from a contract?
I honestly don't know how to answer that question. I mean, 15%, 20%. This is something I wasn't prepared to answer.
Obviously, I believe he lost his claim because it's a contract ending. He wasn't fired. So there's a big difference in how you collect unemployment. Unemployment's changed a lot in the last 50 years. I couldn't even get into what it is and how it works. I wouldn't be able to tell, but it's interesting that a player would try to go that route after his playing days ended. Saturday, May 22nd begins with some transactions. The Kansas City Chiefs involved. We also have fascinating football discussions as the newspaper has a Q&A with who's it with? Discussing wishbone offense in college. Here are the daily recaps. Sunday's football headlines reflected a league that was constantly searching for new talent and new ideas as the NFL prepared for the upcoming 76 season. The Kansas City Chiefs continued building defensive depth by signing defensive tackle Keith Simmons, linebackers Bob Gregolonis, and Bruce Reed, along with cornerback Tim Collier. Like many franchises during the late spring, Kansas City was focused on competition, versatility, and uncovering players who could survive increasing crowded training camp battles. One of the day's more intriguing football discussions came from a newspaper Q&A examining a growing NFL theory involving college wishbone quarterbacks. Teams had begun considering whether some athletic option quarterbacks could successfully transition to defensive back at the professional level. The reason was simple. Many wishbone quarterbacks are among the best pure athletes on college teams. As NFL defenses evolve and zone coverages become more common, clubs are searching for faster, smarter, and more versatile defensive backs. Even so, scouts in 1976 understood that athleticism alone could not guarantee success. The article emphasized that NFL defensive backs still needed the ability to cover receivers one on one, a reminder that the fundamentals of the position never disappeared even as schemes changed. Looking back nearly 50 years later, it's fascinating how modern players of these conversations sound, how modern many of these conversations sound. Position changes, hybrid athletes, and finding creative ways to maximize talent remain major parts of football today. Charles, the idea of moving a wishbone style quarterback to defensive back because they're superb athletes, what do you think is limited in that mindset though?
I haven't thought about changing positions from quarterback to defensive end. It's kind of like going from pitcher to outfielder and vice versa. They're two different arts altogether.
Yeah, and it's been a debate that's gone on all times.
Or the NBA going from power forward to shooting guard, or defensive player like a la Michael Cooper.
And these are not a gimmick. It's not like you're getting beat by 10 runs, so you put a position player into pitch. It's something they're trying to find, something that a superstar athlete can do because there's limited space in the for the quarterbacks on a roster. But it doesn't always work out. Sometimes it does. I mean, some guys like Hines Ward transition from quarterback to wide receiver, but other times Cordell Stewart just, even though it was working out, he still maintained he wanted to play quarterback. And that's eventually what he ended up.
And take a step further, there's only been a few players that have successfully played in two professional sports, Bo Jackson and Deion Sanders among them.
You know, Chris, it's interesting that Joe Paterno actually tried to change Jim Kelly's position to linebacker, and I believe that had Kelly gone to Penn State and done that, I wouldn't be lining up to meet him on June 25th up here in Fort Drum.
Well, funny you mentioned the linebacker thing because in a History of the Bills DVD, I believe Darryl Talley once referred to him. He talked about him as he's a quarterback who plays like a linebacker. Darryl Talley's words, not mine.
That was mentioned a lot by broadcasters in the day, especially when they bring up the Penn State story. Then we have May 22nd ends. We have the weekly recap on the Facebook page. Sunday, May 23rd, Brotherhood has many faces as we look at a fraternity doing the Big Brother thing in Ohio, I believe. Colorado.
I hope it's not too much hazy for the new pledges.
Western State tops the alumni as we have a game between the players and the alumni out in wherever Western State is. We have some roster moves in the NFL and CFL on this Sunday. Edmonton signing 6 players. Busy days. The Dallas Cowboys were no longer simply America's team. They were becoming the NFL standard. Everyone else chased. In a lengthy feature, Tom Landry discussed the challenges of following the Cowboys' surprising Super Bowl run. Football season may still be months away, but the football world stayed busy on this late May Sunday in '76. One of the more heartwarming stories of the day came from Colorado, where members of the Phi Gamma Delta fraternity worked with local boys through the Big Brother program. Touch football games, mentorship, and companionship highlighted how football culture extended far beyond stadiums on Sundays. On the field, Western State wrapped up spring drills with a 13-7 victory over its alumni squad. Gary Savarin kicked 2 field goals, while Phil Wicks added a rushing touchdown in the annual spring football tradition. Transactions remained active as teams continued shaping roster. The Chicago Bears officially signed first-round draft pick Dennis Lick. The New York Jets added quarterback Dave Bucky and receiver Don Bucky. No idea if they're related, but I'm going to assume they're probably brothers. Edmonton Eskimos announced 6 player signings, including former NFL talent and several promising prospects. Meanwhile, the Dallas Cowboys coach Tom Landry offered insight into the upcoming '76 season. Landry acknowledged the Cowboys would face tougher competition after their Super Bowl appearance while discussing the challenge of balancing aging veterans with talent during training camp. The theme of the day reflected the changing football landscape, mid-1970s youth movement, roster building, nonstop player movement, and football remaining part of everyday American life. Chris, the Dallas Cowboys go to the Super Bowl as a wildcard team, officially the first team to do it under the title wildcard. Do you think that what are their expectations? What would their expectations be heading into 76?
Well, first of all, try and win the division, get a home playoff game, because remember, St. Louis won the division last year. The other goal is to try and finish the job, but, they played Pittsburgh about as well as anyone could. But the theory, though, is, when they won their Super Bowl in 71, it was off a Super Bowl loss the year before. So Dallas is hoping history can repeat itself.
Monday, May 24th starts out with an interesting news that would have changed the way we view the modern NFL had this player, Jim Yazoo Smith, been successful as he was trying to sue the NFL over the college draft. Transactions occurring. The Bears, Jets, and Edmonton Eskimos are going at it. Sports Illustrated has Montreal and the Flyers on the cover. Part of the NHL.
And that's because the Habs won the Stanley Cup, sweeping the Flyers 4 straight.
Albeit the combined margin was 5 goals over 4 games, and albeit 3 wins were by 1 goal and 1 was by 2 goals. Ken Dryden has said that they had to drink their champagne sitting down.
The football world on May 24th, 1976 continued to show just how much the NFL was changing both on and off the field. One of the day's biggest stories involved the legality of the NFL draft itself. Former Washington Redskins defensive back Jim Yazoo Smith returned to court in Washington as his long-running lawsuit challenging the NFL draft system and the league's handling of his career-ending neck injury suffered during his rookie season in 1968. In the post-Rozelle Rule era, the NFL was facing increasing legal pressure over players' rights and league control. Transaction wire stayed busy across both the NFL and CFL. The Chicago Bears officially signed first-round draft pick Dennis Lick. The New York Jets continue adding their quarterbacks, Dave and Don Buckley, quarterback and wide receiver. The Edmonton Eskimos signed 6 players, including center Tom Kaduba and running back Jim Herndon, as the CFL camps continued to take shape. Monday also meant a brand new issue of Sports Illustrated hit newsstands. The magazine featured the Montreal Canadiens' Stanley Cup victory over Philadelphia, but football fans were treated to an inside look at the expansion draft Seattle Seahawks. The article explored how Seattle was building its franchise identity from scratch, from coaches and ticket sales to choosing the Seahawks nickname itself. The issue also captured peak 1970s sports culture with Benson and Hedges' 5 long green sports takes ad campaign, which offered sports dream vacations, including a Super Bowl trip to Pasadena, complete with Beverly Hills accommodations and a Las Vegas stopover. By late May of 1976, football season still felt far away on the calendar, but roster battles, lawsuits, expansion planning, and media hype made it clear the NFL never truly slept. Charles, the Seahawks...
Like New York City itself.
Yes, the Seahawks were being featured in this week's Sports Illustrated, and a lot of talk, obviously, is whether the Seahawks and Buccaneers, who did better in the expansion draft. If you were to read that article now, looking back on how both the Buccaneers and Seahawks played in the late 70s, what do you think your advice to the writers have been, knowing now what we know before the article was written?
Now, that an area I have not truly paid attention to, how journalists view expanding teams in any time period. But I'll tell you, you go with youngsters. There's at the start, the Seattle and Tampa Bay. You can go with veterans all you want, but they're only going to be around for a short time. You get the youngsters and see what develops. I mean, you're only going to win maybe 3 or 4 games a year in your first year anyway, so you might as well go with the kids and then see what you can get. And it's not going to be the last time to see if Seattle will go through an expansion, because in November the Seattle baseball team is going to have an expansion draft in the form of the newly aligned Mariners.
Interesting that Seattle went through it back to back so quickly. Monday, May 25th, the Colts are signing more draft picks. I also introduced my author page. Transaction wire kept rolling in the NFL and up north in the CFL. Remembering Samuel Mullen as another NFL player passed away from the early days of the league. Also, Alex Lloyd Jr. passed away as well. He was a 49er. Tuesday, May 25th, football offseason grind rolled on as the NFL and CFL teams continued signing rookies, adding depth, and preparing for summer camps that were now only weeks away. Across the NFL's transaction wires, the Baltimore Colts signed quarterback Mike Kirkland and tight end Mike Furman, as they signed Mike and Mike, maybe not in the morning. The Chicago Bears officially brought in offensive tackle Dennis Lick. They've signed him apparently 3 days in a row, according to newspapers. The Cleveland Browns added quarterbacks Gene Swick and Craig Nagel. I wonder if he's in relation to Browning Nagel. The New York Jets remained extremely active, signing Dave Buckley, Don Buckley, again 3 days in a row, Red McDaniel, Leroy Hughes, Gene Williams, and Mike Green. It's just an interesting note on how some newspapers are covering the same signings day after day, or if it's different newspapers, just 1976, much different. CFL was just as busy. Edmonton added several players, including Jim Herndon, Brant Yoakum, Ted Smith, Floyd Jones, and former Browns lineman Steve Henry. Toronto and Winnipeg also continued strengthening their rosters with rookie imports and veterans as training camps approached. The day also included moments of remembrance for football's past. Former Evansville Crimson Giant player Samuel Mullen was remembered not only as an early professional football player from 1921, but also as the first Native American to attend and play football at Lawton High School in Oklahoma. A World War I veteran and community leader, his story reflected how deeply football history is tied to broader American history. Also, former San Francisco 49er Alex Lloyd Jr., a standout at Oklahoma State during the 1940s who later built a life in business following his football career. By May of 76, football's offseason had become a year-round cycle of roster building, league movement, expansion planning, and reflecting on the pioneers who helped shape the sports a decade earlier. Chris, in today's world, we have round-the-clock coverage of football whenever we want to. But in those days, as I pointed out, some players their names are being reported day after day after day as different newspaper feeds are getting these reports. If you're following a team and a player pops up, how excited are you in May, especially if you don't know the player? You don't have the ability to just go watch YouTube videos to check it out either.
Well, unless it's your team, but it also depends on the situation. Like, is it an injury? Is he re-signing? Has he been cut? Is he been released? It always depends on, it's always also a matter of texture to the situation. Like, what is the headline? Like, sometimes it might be good. Sometimes it might be bad. And some days it just might be Michelob.
On Wednesday,
and also, I want to get VCRs in 1976. Wow, the face value for a Sony Betamax VCR was $1,000 to $1,500 for one VCR in those days.
if you're still joining us, stay tuned. We're getting close to the end of May. And on May 26th, we have an important message. After all the news earlier on in the month on Archie Griffin, he was involved in a car accident and had a slight neck sprain. How will that affect him going into his rookie season? We have more news from Seattle, Pittsburgh, Denver, and Cleveland with their free agency signings. Butch Songen is another big name, passed away. Former Boston Patriot, New York Titan quarterback Ed Butch Songen passed away at the age of 52. But unlike a lot, he was a lot older when he made his NFL debut, as he had also played in the CFL with the Hamilton Tiger Cats. And we are debuting a new segment that will allow me not to talk as much in these days.
I can't hear the video, Vinny.
You can't?
I can't.
Can't. Neither can I.
Well, that's a shame. I guess I'm going to have to read it anyway. All right. Football 50 years ago today. The biggest headline of the day involved two-time Heisman Trophy winner Archie Griffin, who suffered a minor neck sprain in an automobile accident. Thankfully, the new Cincinnati Bengals rookie was treated and released. Around the NFL offseason, roster moves continued as the Seattle Seahawks, Pittsburgh Steelers, Denver Broncos, and Cleveland Browns all added rookie free agents and camp hopefuls while teams prepared for the 1976 season. Sadly, football also lost former Boston Patriots and New York Titans quarterback Butch Songen at the age of 52. Songen was a standout at Boston College, won a Grey Cup in Canada, and later became one of the AFL's oldest starting quarterbacks. From rookie signings to remembering pioneers of the game, football history never takes a day off. Chris, looking back at the Archie Griffin car accident and then where his career would go, you think this may have played any factor in his being somewhat of a bust in the NFL?
I do think so because sometimes accidents are can derail careers. Like how many times? I mean, you never know with car accidents. You never know how. I mean, the players who avoid those troubles are the ones who have the long, prosperous careers. I mean, I mean, who knows? Like sometimes when you get injured in an accident, that can take away your
The most
lateral quick.
notable car accident I remember was Roy Campanella. He was injured in a car accident that left him paralyzed from the neck down for the rest of his life. His playing career with the Dodgers was over. After winning 3 MVPs with Brooklyn.
In a World Series.
Yep.
Moving on to May 27th, which I believe is a Thursday.
Yep.
Losing a little count. Okay. We have troubling news out of Florida State as Michael Schumann was arrested, and Charles did a little bit more research on this after the daily recap hit YouTube. Charles, what information can you add to the Schumann arrest because it seemingly disappeared from the newspapers?
That's right. I looked up any information on all the newspapers, including the Florida one for the next week or so. Nothing. It made you. If a player got caught with drugs today, it would be on the news for days, especially with a nonstop news cycle. But as for Mike Schumann, he did turn around and play in the NFL for 6 seasons, and also played for the Oakland Invaders in the USFL. And following his career, he became a sports reporter for my own KGO just a few miles up north in San Francisco.
Interesting to see how it's changed. Legal aspects have changed where these stories seemingly just vanished after reported, but nowadays it's pressured in, and especially if it was Florida State, you'd have Florida fans just ragging on him, and it would last into the season and follow him for a good portion of his career, especially depending on the severe charges. But moving on, we have the New Orleans Saints, Chicago Bears making moves. And on the recap, today's journey through football history takes us back to a spring day filled with controversy and quiet NFL offseason movement. Florida State receiver Michael Schumann, coming off a season as the Seminoles' leading pass catcher, made headlines after being arrested on drug charges in Tallahassee. Meanwhile, around the NFL, the Chicago Bears acquired offensive tackle Wayne Mattingly from the Pittsburgh Steelers, while the New Orleans Saints added veteran lineman Larry Gagner, or Gagne maybe, I don't know, as teams continued preparing for the upcoming 76 season. It may have been May, but football conversations never stop in 1976. And of course, Charles got into more depth on the Michael Schumann story. Thankfully for him, it had a happy ending. Sadly, too many players, it just spiraled downhill.
And unbeknownst to anybody until several years later, another defensive end, Carl Eller of the Vikings, would become increasingly dependent on cocaine and drugs, but it won't be public knowledge until his playing career was over.
Big news on Friday, May 28th, and that is Seattle lands one of the top free agents in Ahmad Rashad. Of all teams, Seattle Seahawks takes away the former Bills receiver. We have a quarterback controversy brewing north of the border in BC. The expansion Seattle Seahawks continue building their very first roster, signing several free agents, including former Buffalo Bills wide receiver Ahmad Rashad. At the time, Seattle was still months away from ever playing his first NFL game, but the foundation was slowly taking shape. Meanwhile, in the CFL, quarterback controversy was brewing, with the BC Lions veteran quarterback Don Moorhead revealed he was considering walking away from football after being asked to take a major pay cut. At the same time, the Lions were putting their future hopes behind rookie quarterback John Chiara, fresh off leading UCLA to a Rose Bowl upset over Ohio State. Another reminder that even in May, football never truly sleeps. Chris, as a Bills fan, it's never easy to lose anybody, but when your best receiver, your best athlete outside of O.J. Simpson is choosing to go play for an expansion team over coming back to Buffalo, what kind of bad news does that set?
Guess apparently the dude just wants to play indoors because remember, remember, his whole career is played outdoors. Cardinals, Bills. I think he just wants to play indoors.
And by the way, I'm always shocked that Darko didn't play all 75 because of a knee injury. But I thought he was going to sign with the Vikings. I did not know he was signed with Seattle because if I look at footballers.com, he didn't play a game with the Seahawks. He went to the Vikings at some point later in the offseason.
Yep, it's weird how a career happens because nobody ever remembers Ahmad Rashad with the Seahawks. Because you're right, he doesn't end up playing for him. Somehow he ends up in Minnesota, and hopefully we'll find that as we get to it in the news cycle. Moving on to Saturday, May 29th, there's planning for the 43rd annual College All-Star Game is underway. And, of course, this College All-Star Game is going to be bigger than others just for the simple fact that it's the last. Toronto, Hamilton, and several NFL teams are busy on the roster wire. More news on Ahmad Rashad signing with the Seahawks. The Eagles are signing kicker David Ray away from the Rams. Today we pause to remember one of the early pioneers of professional football. This isn't the recap, but it gets into George Bucher, passed away in Leroy, New York. I've got a side story in Leroy I'll get to after the recap. All right. Football fans in 1976 were already looking ahead to the College All-Star Game, where the defending Super Bowl champion Pittsburgh Steelers would face the nation's best graduating players at Soldier Field. The transaction wire also stayed busy across the NFL, the CFL, and as Green Bay, Cincinnati, Denver, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, Seattle, Toronto, and Hamilton, oh my, all added players as teams continued building toward camp. Pittsburgh's signing of Clemson tight end Benny Cunningham stood out as a future championship piece. Seattle's expansion build continued with one of the biggest names yet, former Buffalo Bills wide receiver Ahmad Rashad signing a 3-year deal with the Seahawks. Philadelphia added veteran kicker David Ray, who led the NFL in scoring with the Rams in 73. And we also pause to remember Bill Bucher, a former Detroit Panther end from Clarkson University in Potsdam, New York. Another day closer to kickoff, another fascinating chapter from the football history. I'm going to take the day to talk this one, and it's about Bill Bucher and his connection to the North Country. Now, he's not a name that we learn about in school. He's not somebody we all grow up hearing, oh, Bill Bucher went to college at Clarkson, in Potsdam, just 10 miles from where I went to college. Or that he played his high school at Leroy near Rochester, the school that beat me in the state championship game, beat my team, not me, but my team in the 1995 New York State Championship game. But it is kind of cool when you do realize that sometimes NFL players did come from your home area, even if they were over 100 years ago and you didn't know about them.
I think you better say Bill Bucher, Bucher, not to be confused with a Dodger outfielder with a similar pronunciation.
Very could be. Again, the weekly recap is on Facebook. May 30th, a Sunday, the final football Sunday of May, featured a mix of personal stories and off-season roster building. How come the video isn't? Huh, weird. Kansas City running back Willie Lee was featured the story of the day, missing the 75 season with a knee injury. Lee spoke about his determination for return to place the Chiefs' backfield. His story was a reminder that for many players, the offseason was about fighting for opportunity rather than enjoying fame. The transaction wire stayed busy. The 49ers signed linebacker Jim Snedecki, kicker Bruce Gossett, wide receiver Fair Hooker, never met one. And running back Tom Smith. The New York Jets added center Alan Gulkowski. North of the border, the Winnipeg Blue Bombers signed Georgia Tech running back Rick Hill, while Tennessee announced the hiring of former Georgia Tech assistant Robbie Franklin to its coaching staff. With June just around the corner, football teams across North America continue laying the groundwork for the 76th season. Chris, the story of Willie Lee may not be a famous one, but it's one we hear a lot. A player misses a season due to injury. And the big question is, can he come back? Can he make a difference? Can his career continue on? We've seen it a million times in sports, not just football, but sports overall.
And remember, this was in 1975 when operations and surgeries was very different. Like if you had a serious injury in the mid-70s, that could be a death sentence. We didn't have the technology of today where you could recover much quicker. And by the way, also in regards to the 49ers signing Fair Hooker, I guess San Francisco hasn't met one yet.
All right, moving on to the last day, May 31st. We've come all the way to Monday. It is Memorial Day in 1976, and that doesn't mean that the NFL teams and CFL teams are just sitting still. But a lot of those names were the same names that we mentioned in the May 30th recap, which brings us to the May 31st recap. It's the same names we talked about, so that closes the month. Before we move on to my final piece, Charles, I'm going to turn it over to you to talk some baseball.
Alrighty, and as of May 31st, the Phillies have really charged back that they lead the Pirates by 6.5 games at 30-11. The Reds are a game up on the Dodgers, with the Padres 3 over 500 and 4 games out, largely because of Randy Jones's 10-1 start and 8 complete games. Out east in the AL, the Yankees are either 26-15, 5 up on Baltimore, 5.5 up on Cleveland. The Red Sox, still off the terrible 6-15, are now 3 games below 500, 7 games out, but they're going to be without Bill Lee for a couple of months to a separated shoulder, suffered in a fight at Yankee Stadium on May 20th. And finally, in the West, the Royals lead the Rangers by a game, with the White Sox 3 games out.
Chris, do you have anything to add before we wrap up May of 76?
Kind of crazy that in the month of May 76, few, if any, headlines have been made by the 2-time defending champion Steelers. Kind of crazy how all these headlines, and yet none of them from the team who wears the crown.
Well, I guess the Pittsburgh Steelers, when you're 2-time champions, if it ain't, you might as well keep what you got. After all, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And the NBA, the Celtics and Suns are getting underway in the NBA Finals. Those by the time June 1st rolls around, the Celtics have a 2-1 lead on the Phoenix Suns.
As I look back at May of 1976, I think we're witnessing something bigger than a few contract disputes or offseason headlines. For decades, NFL owners held most of the power. If a player didn't like his contract, his choices were pretty simple: sign it, sit out, or retire. But now the ground is starting to shift. John Riggins is traveling the country looking for the best offer. Archie Griffin is using interest from the Canadian Football League as leverage in negotiations with Cincinnati. The Roselle rule has been struck down. The Players Association is becoming more organized. One by one, players are finding ways to gain a voice in their own careers. In many ways, that's a good thing. That's a good thing. These players put their bodies on the line every Sunday. Their careers are short. They deserve the opportunity to earn what the market says they're worth and to have some say in where they play.
I think in 75, the NFL player salaries were about $15,000 on average in 75.
But there's another side to it. One of the things that helped build professional football was stability. Fans knew who played for their team. Players became part of the community. Rivalries lasted for years because rosters didn't change overnight. You think about the NFL films Chuck Noll and Chuck Bednarik feud. In today's day and age, they might have ended up actually becoming teammates. As player power grows, the challenge for the NFL will be finding balance. Too much owner control isn't healthy for the game, but neither is a system where loyalty disappears completely and every player becomes a free agent mercenary chasing the highest bidder. See college football in the NIL era. 50 years later, we know where this story leads. Free agency will become one of the defining forces in professional sports. Salaries will explode. Players will gain freedoms that would have been unimaginable in 1976. The question isn't whether change is coming. The question is whether football can hold on to the things that made fans fall in love with it in the first place, while embracing a future where players finally have a seat at the table. That's my perspective in May of 1976. And for Chris and Charles and Mark, who couldn't join us tonight, we will see you at the disco. All right, so let me stop recording.